collection of poems um, titled Beautiful Mess and When Love Says Goodbye, which has now been translated to Italian and published in Europe. So congratulations for that, Scholastica. Scholar has co-authored poetry collections titled Dreams and Demons and This Heart of Mine. She is the 2022 Kandeka Prize for African Literature winner, and her work has been featured in reputable magazines such as the Conch Online magazine and Imbiza. She was longlisted for the Rachel. She was also longlisted for the Rachel Simiyu Creative Writers Awards 2024. So all the best in that. She's also she also writes for children's books. So congratulations, Scholar. Next to Scholastica, please help me appreciate Scholar, please, and welcome her to this panel. The next person who has just traveled all the way from Eldoret and has joined us this morning for this panel is none other than Kiprop Kimutai, who is a Kenyan writer and a winner of the 2023 Grey Wolf African Fiction Prize for his manuscript, The Freedom of Birds, which is forthcoming from Grey Wolf Press in 2026. We look forward to seeing that book. His fiction has appeared in No Tokens, the Johannesburg Review of Books, and Kwani, Evergreen Review, and Jalada Africa. He is a 2023 Miles Moreland Scholar and was a finalist for the 2018 Gerald Clark Award. Come on, appreciate Kiprop Kimutai for that. Thank you, guys. Next to me, on my left, this is Scholar V. Akinyi. Scholar V. Akinyi, I think she's one of the Gen Z writers who will be speaking to us this morning. She writes to give voices to children and their seemingly forgotten world views. Her book, Hop, Skip, and Jump, seeks to voice and give prominence to the experiences of children caught up in the Kenya's 2008 post-election violence, to show the importance of inviting children into the discussions about what happens or what shapes the story of the country. I'm not sure if we have any children this morning in this room. Oh, we do. Please, oh, thank you. Thank you. Scholar is gonna be good for you, and I think she's gonna speak to you this morning. So thank you. Can you help me welcome Scholar V. Akinyi? To the end, on my left is none other than Alexis G. Teyie, who is a poet, a data scientist, curator, and a publisher. Alex was one of the co-founders of Encourage Review and currently works with literary journal Down River Road and Karara Community Library. Previous books include poetry, Champ Book, Clay Plates, Broken Records of Kiswahili Proverbs, a children's book, Shortcut, and a print experiment, Hirizi Nadua. Their most recent exhibition titled Amplitudes of Dawn experimented with sound and installation of art to explore the 1982 coup in Kenya. Teyie trained as a historian of visual culture in colonial East Africa and also provides advisory for nonprofits, startups, and impact investors. Please help me welcome Alexis. Thank you. Really nice to have you. And thanks, guys. So we're going to have a conversation this morning, and I'm going to be turning this microphone to these panelists. We'll have the first set of questions, which I'll be throwing to these guys to tell you or to talk to you. And after this round of questions, we're going to turn it to you so that we can listen to you. We'll have probably about 2 questions in this after this first round of the panel, and then we'll open it up further at the end, which I'll probably guide you. So To start us off, let me just turn the microphone. Scholar, you have a microphone. Thank you. So, Scholar, you are a young writer. I call you a Gen Z writer. And your book, tell us just a little bit about your book before we go into like what really inspired you to write in that book.
Thank you so much. I was an A student. I was always number one, so it makes sense that I get the first question. Hop, skip, and jump. The title, if I don't know if you can see it from here, but the jump is crossed. So hop, skip, and jump is a children's game. So the idea behind crossing the jump is the post-election violence of 2007, 2008 happened when I was young. I was in primary school. So we were just children playing and having fun. And then the violence happened and it shook us. So the idea of crossing the jump is we were denied the chance of jumping into proper adulthood. So our childhood was sort of cut short because of the political turmoil in the country. So the book, I will answer what inspired the book. The book was inspired by the need to listen to the voices of children. It is not a children's book. It is just a book that tells the story from the lenses of children. So I would love to make that distinction, that it's not a children's book, but rather it's a book that talks about the politics, talks about mental health and everything, and a lot of other themes, but from the lens of children, the way children observe things, the political turmoil, and how things progressively change as the politics of a country also change. And this was my way of inviting people. We are discussing history. The theme of Macondo this year is the sea is history. When we discuss history, we have to know what happened in the past. We are now the current. We are the current voters, and it is important that we know what the children thought of what happened in the past in the political scene, so that when they become the new adults, they know that they should do right or better for the sake of their country, for the sake of the adults, and for the sake of the children that are coming up. So that was the idea. That is what inspired the book.
Thank you, Scholar. And it's interesting because, of course, we're focusing on Kenya rights, and it's the environment, that whatever happened in the environment of Kenya is what actually, influenced your writing. Like, I'm not sure, maybe, I don't know if without the post-election violence, I'm not sure if you would have written a book by now, but let's just pause it there. But because that is, it's the environment, it's what happened in the environment in Kenya that actually influenced Scholar to, write that book. But let me turn it over to Kiprop Kimutai. First of all, you're the only man on this panel, so my first question is, where are the men? Where are the men? Where are the men?
They're somewhere, I believe. That's my best answer.
Are they writing?
Yes, they are.
I saw at least.
I know some who write, yes. So.
All right. Okay. All right. I hope we'll have more in the Kenya Rights next year on this particular panel. So, Kiprop, you've and I know your book is on the way. It's in the kitchen right now. Could you just tell us, when did you realize your writing skills, and you won the 2023 Grey Wolf African Fiction Prize? When did you realize you could actually write, and how did you scope this prize?
As with everything, it starts in childhood, and it's the stereotypical story of being an awkward child who doesn't fit in with everybody else in school or in the playground. So obviously I relied a lot on my imagination to navigate the world. So I have an elder sister, and I would go to our farm and imagine all kinds of stories, like look at ant hills and termite holes or whatever. I just imagine them as kingdoms, like the very easy things that children do. So I would always come back home and meet her and tell her these stories. And then she told me something really revolutionary one day. She told me, Kiprop, why don't you write these stories down? And I think of that as revolutionary because I guess before that I thought stories dropped from heaven or they grew in trees.
Yeah.
Like just I never realized it's actually an actual act of somebody sitting down and writing these stories and making them a shared reality. So she went to the kiosk, bought me an exercise book, like a 32-page, was it 64-page exercise book, and a pen, and I started the act of writing.
Okay.
I think I was like maybe 8 or 10 or 9.
Right.
Yes, and I just kept on with it. Yes.
And did you grow that journey with your sister, or did you get other people involved within your environment to help you in the
Obviously,
journey?
as you grow older, then you find situations where you can even grow as a writer. When I was at university, at Nairobi University, I joined the AMCA forum at the Goethe Institute, and that's where I built the confidence by meeting other writers to sort of share my work and improve. I took a number of classes, online, physical, and slowly gained the confidence and wrote a manuscript. And I guess, I think everything just reinforces each other. Like I got an agent, eventually sold the book. So things, I guess it's just taking steps and entering spaces where you can nurture your talent. And as with life, everything reinforces each other. And you get the opportunities you get eventually.
All right, interesting. And how did you scope that literary prize in 2023, the Grey Wolf?
I just I had a manuscript which I'd been working on for, I guess, since 2017. Worked on it really, really hard. And when I was done, I wondered where I could submit it to. So I searched Twitter, like novel writing competitions, and I saw Grey Wolf Press African Fiction Prize, which my friend Khadija had won a number of years back. But then I was like, oh, the deadline is almost up, and I have a manuscript, so let me just send it. And obviously completely forgot about it. And
interesting.
Yeah, I just got an email and I was like, oh, I guess you can try things and get them. It was that simple.
Interesting. I hope you're inspiring somebody, a writer in the room on that. Congratulations, winning that, and yeah, congratulations. And Kiprop has written a story, The Test of Honey. He's also written one of the stories in the Let Us Conspire, and other stories. And it's an interesting story, I must say, and I could relate with a lot of the environment that you talked about. Let me turn it over to Scholastica Moraa. Scholar, I would also call you like a Gen Z writer. You are an enthusiast when it comes to like writing poetry. And writers tend to get inspiration from different places. Where do you think, what would you say really influenced your decision in writing poems?
I think it started as Kiprop said, almost everything starts when you are a child. So I was lucky enough in primary school to have my teacher of English who really loved poetry. He would write us poetry, he would let us recite the poetry. So from a young age, already my love for poetry was already sown. The seed was already sown. But I didn't think I could write. I don't know, maybe some grow up knowing, oh, I'm going to write poetry, but it felt like something so complicated, something I may not be able to do. But then I went to high school. I still loved poetry. As much as my classmates used to complain, poetry is so difficult, you're not understanding it, we don't understand the persona, what they are feeling. I could understand what the persona was saying, what they were feeling, why they were writing that. But still, I was not writing.
Okay.
I think until I was finishing my high school, and I penned something down. I think it was for a friend. It was something encouraging, and it came out poetic. And I was like, "Damn! I mean, I can do this." So but still, I didn't pursue it. But after, when I went to college, we had this Composon magazine where they wanted writers who could pen something, and I felt like this is something I can do. I started writing poetry. After college, I still kept writing, and my friends loved the poems. They could understand them. They said this is different from what we got in high school. We enjoyed this, but still, I couldn't. I was not thinking of a book or anything like that until I met a publisher, an editor actually, who was freelancing, and they were like, "You have really good poems. There are so many. Why don't we compile them into a book?" And then, but I was still reluctant because publishing is a huge mountain. I don't think I can climb it. But I think I was really dragged into it because first, my background is not even in literature. I felt like writing is my retirement plan. I don't think I want to do this right now. But then poetry kind of found me. I found myself writing. I don't really even have a schedule on I'm writing in the morning or this. I just write in the moment. I felt this. I'm sitting in the audience and I feel inspired to write something. I write it in the moment. I'm trying to sleep, and I have this sentence in my head that just can't let me, rest. I write in the moment. So I think poetry kind of dragged me into this.
Interesting. And I'll ask you a question, but I'll pick it up from like the publishing. You've talked about publishing. We'll come to you after you've published your book. You'll tell us the state of, the reception of poems in Kenya, but that's a question you'll answer me later on. Let me turn it over and just picking up from where you've just ended on the publishing bit of it. And I want to turn it to Alexis. Alexis, you've published your books. You've done self-publishing. You've published some of your writing with publishers, actually 2 publishers. How is that experience? Could you just share with us your experience in traveling through all those ways of getting your work published?
Yes, I'm happy to. And I'll speak about it in 2 ways, as more recently as a publisher myself, and also being published by different entities. I'll say this: the first book I did was primarily through recommendation. So I think it's wonderful to hear everyone speak about the friends and the ways that we help each other in writing community. So the first book was through a wonderful friend who's also a poet and connected me to the African Poetry Book Fund. I submitted the first round and they gave me very kind feedback, which I think is very rare, and then very promptly rejected me. And then I submitted again the next year, and then I had better luck that time. And so I think a lot about the value of publishing in that route was to have a very thoughtful, considerate reader. In this case, it was someone whose work I respect. Kwame Dawes is a wonderful poet. And to have that sensitive reading, it felt like, to me, that felt like, that in itself was just a gift beyond even seeing myself in print. So I think that was very powerful. The second book I worked on with a museum, so it's a very different type of publisher in that their business is not publishing, so they were much more freewheeling, and I enjoyed having the independence of doing that. With my friend Valiant Wayaki, who's also in the audience and is an artist, that was my favorite experience because before I was very hesitant to self-publish because part of it was like seeking validation. It's nice to say you have a stamp of approval. So I think it was something I could only do after having a sense of confidence that, I do care about words.
Interesting. And picking up, because I think in this funnel you're probably like the only one who is publishing. So from your experience as a publisher and publishing others, what's the state of actually getting, because writers have been struggling getting, of course, publishers to include, I'm sure yourself, as you've just mentioned, getting a publisher who could publish your book. What's your experience now as a publisher?
That's my pet subject. I have many thoughts about that. So I'd say being on the receiving end of a publishing contract and that process, but also being on the other end, I think more a lot about the ecosystem of making art and making writing. And I think publishers, certainly in Kenya and even in the region, are struggling in two ways. If I were to summarize, the first one is, you could say financing, but that cuts across the board, but also a question of distribution. So for example, we were very proud when Nkare was online publishing and we couldn't pay anyone, including ourselves. It was tedious, and you'll know many of these communities do tend to burn out because no one is funded, and that's incredibly taxing also on their relationships. For Downriver Road, we were keen to publish everyone, but we could only afford 3,000 bob, Kenya shillings, which is not fair. You've written a wonderful story, you've put your heart into it. We literally only have 3,000 bob, and that's because we ourselves are not getting paid. So that's a huge bottleneck. But I think the other thing is that I'm very excited about ways in which publishers are trying to think beyond a received mode of what publishing must look like, which is to say, how does a book look like? How do you organize a page? So some questions around that. But the second thing is being more thoughtful about publishing differently, not just in English or French and Portuguese. So for example, I think one of the most exciting books I remember reading maybe 15 years ago, the Kiswahili words were not italicized, and to me that felt such a simple thing but very powerful. So Hirizi and Adua, we made sure that we were publishing across language, which is very exciting to me. But all of that is to say, I think there's so many wonderful people. There's Kwanyu, the Q. There's so many newer publishers. Even if we fade away, more people are coming. It's kind of wonderful.
Interesting. And we'll be talking about your writing styles at maybe in the second set of questions, because your writing style is really interesting. The way you packaged your writing, including having Swahili in one place, having English. It's an English poem, but you've used Swahili words here and there. So we'll talk more about that. Thank you so much. Let me turn this to Buke at the end. Buke, your writing is heavily influenced by by your culture and history. I read one of your stories in this particular book, and I could clearly see you've brought up going back to the Kenyan environment and how it really affects your writing, and you get somehow inspired to write the story, even if I felt like it was sad. When I was reading the story, I was sad reading it, but at the end, I kind of felt encouraged. And I just wanted to ask you, from your personal point of view, what is it that is important for you to incorporating your own personal and cultural identity into your writing? Because I feel like there's a lot of authenticity and original voice in what you've written. So could you just tell us a little bit about that?
I'm really someone that grew up on a lot of mainstream media, telenovelas and writing, art in all its forms. And the problem that I found with that is my thinking sort of started getting skewed. I would think of myself in a way that wasn't really familiar. For example, when I think about, say, marriage, I would think, walking down the aisle and writing vows, which isn't something that will happen to me. It isn't something that is familiar. And, I think the problem with trying to fit in with everything that is in the mainstream is that I lose my own identity. And when I have tried to write in a way that doesn't really reflect my own culture, but it felt fake and it felt like an act, and I really couldn't write, more than maybe a few hundred words. So Kenya really is a place that is very culturally diverse. We have a lot of communities, we have a lot of different traditions, and literature as something that reflects the society that we live in, is something that should have diverse voices, and I'm just one of many. And more recently, there's a lot of writers that focus on their own personal identities, and it's good that we can see these perspectives that maybe we're not used to. This is what I want to do with my writing. I want to present an identity that may not be familiar with most people. I want to show a side of the world that is different, and I want to prove that something being different doesn't mean it's wrong, or it should change. Cultures and traditions are really important. They make up who we are, and I am not who I am without the traditions that have come into play when I've been raised, the way my parents grew up and the way I've grown up. There's a certain thing that is very different from maybe how you've grown up, and exposing Kenyan writers, to this sort of to this different sort of perspective is what really makes me feel like my voice is important. Like we need to share stories. Yeah.
Great. And do you think in the stories, because of course you have different characters, and you seem like you are addressing different audiences, including like your parents, our parents, your friends' parents, people within your environment, in terms of young girls, because your stories from a feminism point of view. Do you think that's a story that would be accepted in your community?
Well, acceptance is a big thing. I don't know about acceptance, but
Okay.
it's important. Some cultures, if you've read the story, there's a certain culture that sort of it preys on women especially, and
Yeah.
that's the point that I'm trying to put across. Some things really are outdated, and in the world we live in today, we have to make steps to change. And you can read that story and think, this is a bit too much, but it's what happens. It exists and it's there. It might be sad, but it's true. And it might not be accepted, but it's something you'll have to face and talk about, at some point or the other.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you give these guys a round of applause? Just as an encouragement for that. Thanks, guys, for that. And it's that particular session that we want to just hear from you. Maybe you have any questions. We'll probably just take two questions. I have to, thank you. I'll have one question on this row and one question here. So if we can do that. There's a microphone there. There's a microphone going down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes.
First of all, thank you to the panelists and congratulations on your work. My question is for Buke, since you were just speaking. Buke, in your story, My Name is Blank, I'm wondering, just picking up on the comments you were just making, is that a story of injustice? Or is it a story of tradition? You mentioned tradition. Or is it the wrong question?
Well, there is no wrong question. It really depends on how you read it. The story of Magale, it is more a story of tradition than injustice. What happens obviously is unfair. But when we look at the experiences that we have with people on the personal levels, I think justice isn't something that is really a focus. And what Magale goes through, traditionally speaking, and when you look at cultural views, it is something that happens to a lot of people. It isn't something that you will consider an injustice when you look at it from an outside perspective. or even with the people in my community, it isn't something that they will consider like an injustice. It's just something that, it happens. And the narrative really is that there is, one person that dictates your entire life. And when you lose that person and you lose that meaning that they gave to your life, what do you do with yourself? Because women are most times they're really tied to some, there's just a little thing that our value is tied to, be it a chastity or whatever. There's just something that really, separates one woman from the other. And it's a mentality that a lot of people have, and it isn't just in my community. It exists in a lot of the communities. It exists in Kenya. I mean, in February and more recently, there was like a surge of femicide. And you look at these cases and people are talking about, oh, the woman, should have done this. The woman shouldn't have angered the man. That maybe he wouldn't have killed her. So it really is a story of what are we telling ourselves, that we can be able to do these things and have these conversations and make someone live out a certain life and be okay with that. So it isn't more of an injustice, but mostly like traditional. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. There was one question here. There's one question. Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, thank you. Yes, good morning. I have two things to say. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Buke, for coming to a clarity about the importance of your voice and for sharing it so clearly. You're right. It's important to have stories of people who are not considered the mainstream. Then the mainstream, what is that? Perhaps it can shift in its stream. And then I have a question about childhood. Earlier, the moderator had asked, are there any children in the room? And I said, yes, I am here. And I think so are we. I think if we consider ourselves somebody's child, if we consider that we were once a child, I think there are so many children here.
Yeah.
And I have a question about writing, not writing for children, but writing children. I've been seeing some gorgeous, gorgeous work in the Nairobi literary scene. Big shout out to Alea, who's sitting right in front of me and makes such wonderful work for children. I've been seeing it in a story that was recently published that Alexis G wrote called Bold Dandelions, with Idza Luhumio's work, with Lutvini Majanja's work. Such a tenderness around childhood and writing nostalgia so beautifully. I'd like to ask the panel if they engage in child-based writing and what that does for them as they approach children these days, as they approach the children that they are, as they approach what it means to have been a child in a place like this one. What insights do the panel find in coming closer and closer to their inner children? How are they able to find children and the voices of children and their voices as children? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's Wayaki. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for
my
that
name is
question.
Wayaki.
Okay, thank you for that. I think Scholar would handle that question better because some of the characters actually most of the characters in her story is children. How did you do that?
Yeah, writing children is interesting because first, all of us have been children. Not all of us have been adults, but all of us have been children. So it's for most part, it's easy to write children because we've been them. We've been children, and there's always a child in us. Even as we grow older, there's always a child in us. So your question is the experience of writing children, what it's like. I think there's a vulnerability to writing children because often we don't give much prominence to the worldviews of children. They are just people who are born and given clothes and food and taken to school and expected to follow the rules that have been set. They are guided to do things and they are advised to follow career paths. And we fail to give them that sense of agency that they have their own worldviews. They are human beings in their own sense, and they have their emotions. And to just weigh in a bit on a debate that was recently happening, someone said that they really don't understand why children cry. And I was a bit shocked because even as human beings, as adults who cry, especially women when they're heartbroken, they cry and they wet their pillows with their tears. They express their emotions. But here are children who are supposed to express their emotions, and they do not have that emotional bandwidth to regulate emotions. But then we do not understand that they can have emotions and choose to express them how they best understand. So there's a vulnerability, and there's when you write children, it's like you're forcing your way into the world of adults. You're being a kiherehere, because you know children are supposed to sorry for the people who are not Africans, but mostly in the African culture, children are supposed to keep quiet and listen to the adults talk. So when you write children and you amplify their voices, it feels like, how are these children actually observing the politics of a country? Do they have the brains to do that? How are they understanding that this is a mental health issue? Do they have that brain or the bandwidth? So writing children is just similar to writing adults. It's just that there is a vulnerability, and it has to be done forcefully with some sort of I want to make my way. I want to make my voice heard, because the children have their worldviews that the adults have to understand and incorporate into their own worlds. I hope you're answered.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's really cool. And we have something for you from this panelist, is to listen to this.
Hatari Mwatamu by Alexis Teyie.
Your dreams belong to you alone. Dreaming is profession, civic gift, cosmic assignation. Have you forgotten what your voice sounds like? This chorus needs every noise you didn't know you commanded. We magnetize each other. You have always known the song you came to sing. We exchange throats. Una wachungaji wasiohesabika. Wataitika, waite. Mami wata, mami wata. The sleep mechanic, mtungaji, sings the sun in. You are a lullaby. Keep that golden eye on yourself. Call upon everything with wings. This is how you walk on water.
When Love Says Goodbye by Scholastica Moraa.
58. Loving you. Loving you is like jaywalking a tightrope, tunnel vision, hands out for balance, feet firm with imaginary stability, like an acrobat. Loving you is like one misstep and I fall, one mischance and I fall, never to be seen again. Loving you has seen me holding onto the rope with both hands, my feet having given up on us long ago, my voice hoarse with screaming, my heart bleeding, and a voice whispering, we were never built for this. The Mayor and the Parsley-Loving Gorilla by Kiprop Kimutai.
When a king from the Congo gifted our mayor 11 gorillas, the mayor decided to chase us off the land and build a zoo in which he would keep them. He said, so while shaking King's hand, speaking French that wasn't our national language, and only because he had studied at Alliance, the king handed him a necklace made from blocks of gold, and the mayor hung it on his neck as he spoke. A hideous new center. A fellow citizen translated his statement on Twitter and made it trend. The city's citizens picked the social media battle and harangued the mayor. He removed his profile photo and stopped tweeting. We had won. We believed. So it was a surprise to see his paving trucks outside our Mabati and Wattle houses at 6 in the morning. Police officers walked inside our homes with insectal fury and dragged out our mattresses, meko, stools, and water buckets as if they were the innard of rodents they had devoured. My name is Blank by Buke Abduba.
My mother breaks down on seeing me. She cries, throws herself onto the ground, and drags me down with her by grabbing at my feet. She begins to hit me, the golden rings on her fingers tearing at my skin. She pulls at my hair, chunks of it getting stuck between her rings, and the rest pulling at my scalp in defiance, coercing tears out of my eyes. Nobody stops her. I lay still beneath her, taking the assault, wishing she was strong enough to hurt me in a way we both could never come back from. Within moments, her body fails her. Breathing heavily through her mouth, she crawls away from me and grabs my father's thin legs to pull herself up. She sits down on the bed and begins to curse at me. My chest shrinks. The pain overwhelms me, but there is no refuge from her disappointment. The very air is infused with it. I cannot breathe without it slitting my throat. Hop, Skip, and Jump by Scholar v. Akinyi.
We have been here long enough to know that violence begets violence. People wake up in the middle of the night to find the tents over their heads gone, and not stolen by wind, but by fellow IDPs. The face of scarcity endangers heightened survival instincts. Everyone is fighting. Children fight over handmade toys. Women fight other women when their children fight. Men still hold on to their political beliefs with aggressive conviction and still get into fist fights over the election results. The teenagers and children, us, don't know where we best fit in this equation. It's not a good time to write love letters. It's not a good time to check on friends, because every conversation is marred with silent sorries and pities, and the vulnerability is a little too intense for us. We seem to be the ones seeing what's happening, and we are torn between being unbothered children and the fighting. ever vigilant adults. We have been ripped off the innocence of childhood, and I know it's never coming back.
Good morning or afternoon. My name is Diana Wangare, voice artist working with eKitabu.
Good morning. I'm Cleophas Oluoch, voice actor, and I'm here today at Macondo LitFest 2024.
Come on, give them a better round of applause, guys. They haven't done a good job. At least you've had a test of the stories from this panelists today. And I am hoping that you've enjoyed the stories, because when I was growing up, we were taught we basically sat in the evening after having dinner, and you're sitting just by the fireside and having stories from our grandparents. Kiprop, I'm sure you had some of that stories. And we're just getting into the second set as we wrap up this panel session. And this, I'm just going to pick up from, after listening to the stories. I hope you enjoyed. Scholastica Moraa. You started your work writing your poems. You started as a self-published author. When you were starting, because I know you mentioned to us earlier, you wrote the stories. Did you want to publish it with a publisher? Because you mentioned something about that effect. And how did you end up doing self-publishing? And now you're transitioning to start publishing with a publisher, because your book has now been translated to Italian. You're working your new book, When Love Says Goodbye, you published with a publisher. How is that transition to you? And after you talk about that, you'll tell us about the reception of poetry in Kenya.
Let me start with
the experience, like the self-publishing and basically publishing with a publisher. I think picking up from what Alexis mentioned.
Okay. Okay, it started with the story getting published. So that is why sometimes I have this audience that knows me as a story writer, and then there's an audience that knows me as a poet. But I think they're coming together, they're knowing that I'm doing both. That teacher I talked about, I think teachers play a very important role, sent me a link to apply to submit a story for Kendeka Prize for African Literature. That was back in 2021. And I didn't want to submit because I was like, am I a writer? But it was very nagging. Have you submitted? Did you submit? Okay, because I'm not very good at lying, I had to write and submit, and then it just stopped. And the story was longlisted. That is when I started feeling, oh, you mean I can write? And the story was published. The 2021 I'm Listening collection. After that, I did the poetry. I published the poetry in 2022, just after the elections, because I was in a rush, actually, to publish before anything happens, because, we have a history of election violence, and I was, because now I started feeling like I'm a writer, and I really have something good to give to the world. Let me rush and do that before anything happens, because I may die. We have that fear after the election violence. Yes. Anything can happen in this country. So I chose self-publishing because the writers I had talked to, actually some of the publishers too, didn't want anything to do with what I was writing. They didn't want short stories. They didn't want poetry. They wanted children literature, something I was not doing yet. And I had also had stories of you give a manuscript to a publisher and it stays there for years. Sometimes nothing comes out of it, and I didn't want that to happen to me. I think I have this Gen Z impatience. We want things to happen
Quickly.
really fast. We don't have the patience to wait until maybe the publishing world is ready for what you are writing. And that is how I did. I self-published. I self-published the first collection, the second, the third. But I had so many challenges because number one, resources. You have to finance everything from editing, and sometimes you can't even afford a really good editor, cover design. Like you are paying for everything, and you don't even have anyone who can guide you. Like this is how you do it. I think right now the environment is changing because there are so many freelancing publishers coming up to help self-publishers. But I think I had that passion. I wanted my poetry out there. I wanted people to read what I was doing. I wanted them to change their perception on poetry. And I think that starting point helped me transition into the traditional publishing world, because when finally a traditional publisher came to me, okay, of course it started with the Italian agent and then Ikitabu. When they came to me, I had something to give them, this is what I do, this is what I've done. Do you think we can walk this journey together? Yeah, so I think it had to start that way.
Thank you. Thank you. And you can show the book for.
Yeah, this is done by Mvua Press. It's an imprint of Ikitabu. It's traditionally published. It's called When Love Says Goodbye. And then there is this. It's done by Non Solo Poesie Edizioni. It's both in Italian and English. It's called Sometimes Love Lives Here.
Congratulations, Moraa. And thank you. I think you've covered actually, like, in terms of reception, you've talked about the publishers, the process, and they had other needs and not meeting the needs that you have. Do you think that the Kenya is actually receptive in terms to poetry?
I think they're trying.
They're trying. That's good. That's good. They're not yet there, but we are getting there.
And I hope it is going to get better, because poetry is really beautiful.
Yes.
It's actually the easiest way to learn a language.
Cool. No, thank you. Thank you for that, Scholar. This is really helpful. So let's go back to Buke. What is the role? What role has mentorship and community played in the journey of as a writer, basically? And how do you intend to using your experience to support, upcoming writers? Because I am sure, like you told me, you're from Moyale, right? And I'm sure there are young writers in Moyale. How would you advise them?
I actually think it is almost impossible to survive as a writer without a community. There was a moment, I think in 2022, where I wanted to get involved in the Kenyan literary scene. I did a Google search, very little came up. You obviously can see a few writers on there. You go read their work, but outside of knowing they exist and, reading new literature, it did not help me in any important way. So the community that I have right now, it found me really after my shortlisting for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. I got in contact with a writer from Marsabit. He's called Ali Abraham. He's really been a great figurehead in my journey as a writer. I consider him my mentor. I mean, I'm not sure he knows, but To me, he is my mentor. When I was starting out, there's obviously a lot of questions. There's always a little fear of, am I doing this right? Am I making a mistake? It involves big things and it involves little things. There was a time I wasn't sure that an edit that was made by an editor for a short story that I was publishing in a magazine. I wasn't sure that the edits were a good fit, and I wanted to say no, I'm not gonna change that. And I had to ask him, hey, do I have to accept everything they tell me to change? Because I didn't want to step on any toes. I didn't want to say no, I can't, and someone say, oh, she's being difficult. So really, this is an example of something very little that I experience, and I pick up the phone and I'm like, hey, can you help? So, that is really important. He's helped me meet a lot of people. Me being here today is, it all goes back to him. It all goes back to that. And I wouldn't be here without the community that he helped me create. And I wouldn't be here without his mentorship, him telling me he's been exposed more than I have to the scene. He's been around a lot and a long time. Not that long, okay. He isn't that old. So yeah, he's better than I am, and there's people like, I think Kiprop here. You also I think compared to me, you're someone that has experienced a vast from Kwani and all these things, and it is important to engage with people like this so that you can understand the scene in Kenya. And so for me, I am doing my best. I'm still continuing to do my best to understand the scene. And I think for now, that is the most I can do to help, any upcoming writers. I have not met any new writers from Moyale. If they exist, they should, call me.
Cool.
Yeah, but the most that I can do is learn as much as I can so that when it happens that there's someone there that needs help, that needs guidance, I can be there the way other people have been there for me.
Thank you, Abdul. Thank you for that, because just picking up from the role of the community and how it influences our space of writing, especially you as a writer, I'm just going to turn it to Alexis. And how does your work, growing community with others in the literary space interact with your individual sort of artistic practice?
For that. I think to me, reading is more exciting to me than writing. And for that to be possible, I'm excited for I think the word that comes to mind is an efflorescence. Very many writers and artists playing across genre, but also hopefully collaborating with artists of different disciplines. So I consider that kind of supreme. And I love to read about other writers' histories. And I love to see them in literary salons, meeting each other, having fun, reading and enjoying each other. So to me, I think the work feeds into each other. The more I read like the people on this panel, the more excited I am to also face the page. So I think to me they're incredibly connected, and I'm so glad that there are so many people who are also invested in that work, in making space for each other. And as I say, I think the most exciting gift you can give a writer is like a sensitive reader. Just one, I think, is sufficient to keep you writing another year. So the more people who are invested in doing that, in training to become editors, in daring to start publishing and creating more avenues, I think the better.
All right, wonderful, thank you. No, that's helpful, and actually brings out like there's a different type, of community of, there's friends who are around you, there are other writers who are around you, and there are publishers who are around you, and there, of course, there's your audience, the readers, which is also really important to connect to them. Just moving to Scholar V, Akinyi, did you come across any specific challenges publishing, or rather writing hop, skip, and jump, and how did you handle that?
Um, whenever I'm asked the question about challenges in writing, it sounds like tabloid seeking gossip for the the celebrity couples who look very flashy on the outside, but behind the scenes there are things happening. So last year during the Nairobi Fest, yeah, the guest author was asked if one of the characters in the book is him. And what he said is what I'm going to borrow from to answer this question. He said that when you go to the butchery, you just get the meat. You don't get to see what happens in the slaughterhouse. So, of course, there are a lot of challenges. And in the spirit of raising Kenyan writers, I wouldn't say that there is a specific challenge that would replicate on another one. I would have my specific challenges that would only apply to me as scholar, that will not apply to Alexis. But generally, I think in self-publishing, the finances, of course, you have to think about it because you'll have to self-finance or find or convince someone that your story is good enough to be sponsored into a book. My specific challenge was I was writing about something that happened 16 years ago, and I was very young, and even back then, because I borrow largely from my observations when I was a child. So maybe the research bit of it, of actually wanting to know what exactly happened, what led to this turmoil, political turmoil, and trying to understand the nature of the politics back then. So I had to go back into reading, and the challenge about that is the things that happened back then were very gross. And also going back to my life as a child then and reliving that experience, what was a bit intense. And one of my editors, I had two editors, one of my editors is here. I'm a bit short-sighted, I can see one. If the other one is in the room, don't feel abandoned. But when I gave my editor the book, when she called me, there was a moment of silence. And she asked me, because we sort of are friends as well, and she asked me, is this a part of your story? Do we really know you? Because it was so heavy. So the specific challenge for me was going back into the really ugly of it, and still come out and write it so gently in a child's voice. And the other challenge that I experienced is I wanted to tell this story in 3 voices. So I wanted every character or every child to have their independent voice in telling the story. So I could not write 3 books, and I had to intertwine these stories because these children grew up in the same community, in the same neighborhood. So the story is told in a way that after reading chapter 1, when you go to chapter 2, you realize that it's no longer a girl talking, it's a boy talking. So I had my doubts whether my readers would understand what is going on, because most of the feedback that I got was, I was confused at some point because I didn't get your style, but eventually the readers catch up. So those were my challenges. But about writing generally, I wouldn't say, and this is not to sound overconfident, because I sat in a class for 4 years to study writing and language. So the writing bit of it was easy. Just the emotional bit and having to go back into the past were a bit challenging. And of course, I was very broke. I had to source for money to publish the book.
Thank you, Scholar. That's those are interesting sort of challenges that you face that I'm sure like most writers do face. And just to wrap up this particular round of questions, I'm turning this to Kiprop. you have some experience you've had some experience writing, publishing with different, organizations, writing pieces here and there. How do you see the environment for creative writing for Kenya now? And do you think it's something that is fixed, or do you think it's gonna change? And yeah, so how do you see it now, and how do you see it in the future?
Well, I would say we have a voice, and that voice needs to be broadcasted. We live in a really difficult world where everything around us tries to make us feel as small as possible, to make us feel powerless. And we have power. The industry has power. The community has power. The writers have power. And I guess like you just need to go back to the power you have to collaborate, to write, to make what you write a shared reality, because it's essential. We live in a world where, with so many fears, and we're even told to be fearful of our fears. We live in a world where currently you cannot even say, stop killing us, because that's like a dangerous one. And it's something really genuine, but you're not supposed to say that. And yeah, so we just need to write and collaborate and keep on, and to create narratives, to archive ourselves and our experiences. And on a very realistic level, yes, like when it comes to funding, that's difficult. When it comes to sustaining your life so that you can write, to navigate the world where you need money, like money is always needed. I guess it's more just about knowing our stories is essential, and finding opportunities for collaboration, for raising funds to make these narratives happen. And it's happening a lot. Like there's so much publication coming out of Kenya. And I like the work that Alea Kasam through the Lamb Sisterhood is doing, publishing short stories for children for free. What DRR is doing, and Jalada Africa. There's so many Ikitabu. So the only thing we can do is to keep on. Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us this morning for these questions. I hope you have gotten a bit of their experience and focusing on writing in Africa, or even just specifically Kenya. I want to take just some few more minutes. We'll probably just take about 3 questions maximum. So the first, okay. So I saw her hand first. And then I'll come to the gentleman on this side. Then I'll go back. I want somebody at the back. Okay, there's somebody at the back. Okay, so we'll go with you.
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question. I think to Scholar and Buke. How do you debrief? Yesterday on the poetry protest conversation, we asked the poets, when you write about femicide and when you write about the problems we face, how do you go back to knowing that you exist? Like when you write, like when Buke writes on men killing women, how do you then remove yourself from the shoes of a woman who is being subjected to these things and go back to knowing that you have maybe male relatives who care for you? And Scholastica, when you write poetry, maybe as a heartbroken person, how do you go back to knowing that I'm assuming at that time maybe you're not heartbroken. How do you go back to how do you go back to still being in love? Like, do you have a meditation technique? Do you have grounding? Or do you have a therapist? Yeah.
So maybe you can start with Buke.
I would say that the writing itself is actually therapy, because once I put it out there, I'm done with it. Actually, sometimes I even forget about it until I read it later, and I'm taken back. But the writing itself, I think it's the therapy for me. I don't have any rebooting technique.
Yes, Buke.
I've been asked a similar question before, and I share the same views as Scholastica. Writing is therapy. I always say that literature is, more than anything, it is a way of letting people, get a bit of empathy. When you read something, it doesn't matter if you've experienced it personally, but reading it and seeing this new perspective and being moved by it, it's something that is really, I think, the point of literature, to make us more empathetic to other people's way of lives, to experience these ways of lives, even if it is impersonally. So I have never experienced anything close to anything that I write. But when you exist in a certain community, you hear stories, people talk, and there's, as a human being, you're bound to feel something. So when these feelings sort of, they build up, and you're like, let me just, write it. So the writing is therapy. I write it down, and I'm done with the story, and I put it down. And when I do come back later, I think sometimes I even tear up a little bit, because, it's really sad, but it isn't my life as such. It is someone's life, though. And it is important for me to show this perspective and have people get a bit of empathy and understand other people's way of life. So it isn't really that hard to sort of leave that space, because I'm not experiencing anything of that sort in my own personal life. So it's not a really hard place to live, I would say.
Thank you. I hope you got your question answered. Please ask one question because of time. We'll take both questions, and then we'll come back to the floor for response.
Mine is a very short question. What can you comment or say about the mental health of our writers or people in the creative industries? Because we have so many writers who have burned down, and some are even languishing in rehabilitation homes. So as ranked young writers, or maybe Kenyan writers, what has been your mental health, or how have you been coping about your mental health, especially in the creative industry? It's affecting our filmmakers, it's affecting our writers, script writers, even some of our leading journalists. Imagine there's a journalist who was one of the best frontline reporters during COVID. Right now, as we speak, is languishing in a mental rehabilitation center in Mombasa. So as writers, how are you dealing with your mental? Because you have to meet the deadlines with the editors, your books that come out, the financial bit, the business aspect of. So how are you coping, or what steps are you taking to navigate such kind of challenges? And we as the writing community, what are we doing to those writers who are left behind? The ones who are maybe best-selling writers, award-winning writers, but right now they are that side of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We get the question. Thank you. There was one question at the back. If we can, panelists, you can be thinking about that. I think Alexis or Kiprop, you can think about that question about mental health. Yes.
Thank you. My question goes to Scholar Akinyi, and it has to do with what I would call the challenge of historical context. You've written about the 2007-2008 post-election violence in Kenya. And we know that that violence didn't just spark from nowhere. There was a context of history spanning decades in terms of the what I would call bad governance in the post-election, post-independence period, and even certain historical injustices going back to the colonial days. How did you navigate so that your book gives full context and not just talking about post-election like it has arisen from nowhere? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have Kiprop responding to the mental health one, and then of course Scholar will do that.
On mental health, I would say writing is not therapy. And for me, it's essential that I believe that, because therapy and writing need to be worlds apart. For me, writing is about illuminating on an experience, perhaps making it larger than yourself, but it's not healing. It's not about putting it out so that you can heal. It's just about enlarging your imagination around it and bringing other people inside that imagination. And to mistake that as therapy, I think, as therapeutic can be really harmful, because I have a therapist, so it's important for the stories that you need from your life, that you need to heal from, you need to find someone who's skilled to navigate you to heal and to expunge that experience from yourself so that it doesn't keep traumatizing you. So for me, my advice would be, if you're in the creative space, don't think that the work that you're doing is therapy for yourself, because it's not. Find someone who can allow you to heal. And about accessing therapists, I know that's a challenge, because then it comes back to people who are trained and also money. So I guess if you have creatives around you in your community, advise them that the work they're doing is not therapy. And if you can, and they want to, you can pay for their therapy sessions. I think so. If you can, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Scholar.
Thank you for that important question about historical context when writing about such things. Now, if or when you read my book, you'll realize that the adults are totally removed. They don't feature anywhere. They're just extras in the story. And the reason why I did that is because it's the responsibility of the adults to shape the society. In the book, children are just children in their world. They're writing letters and they are looking forward to Christmas. And it's very hard to place that responsibility on children, because they were thrown into this turmoil and they did not understand why it was happening, because they did not understand the conflicts that happened in the 1992. They did not understand what led to the war between, the ethnical cleansing sort of that happened during that time. They were just children, and suddenly you're being told that, Akinyi is our enemy, or Kiprop is not our person. But these are people you sat with in class. They were your friends. You were competing for position 1. You probably was in love with a boy, and suddenly you're being told that these are not our people, these are our enemies. So it is not, because I write for children and I will speak for children, it is not the responsibility of children to put context into what is happening. They're just children who expect the adults, or children who are under the responsibility of the adults. However, I will answer your question into giving historical context. What the book does, it gives avenue, or it gives room for people to now discuss how we ended up here. So I hope that answers you. So it is just children who are thrown into this, and then now we have to understand, how did we get here? But it is the adults to answer this question. and not the children to answer this question. I'm just giving the worldviews of children who are sort of meshed in the world that is run by adults. I really hope this answers you. Okay.
Thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed this Kenya Rights session. We've come to the end of that session, and we want to respect the time. The timekeeper has told me we have to end. So we wish we could have taken more questions, but these guys will be available for you to talk to them. I believe you guys are around so that you can interact with these guys. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for listening to us this morning. Thank you. Have a wonderful day and enjoy Macondo Festival 4th edition. Bye-bye.